Let's move to talking to John in Australia. This is going to be an interesting. Yeah, John. So you're not from America, but you're pro-Trump, it sounds like. What you got going?
Hello there. Am I audible? Yes. I would say I'm relatively pro-Trump. I'm not all the way in. I'm a libertarian. At least that's how I would probably define myself. But
well, I don't know if you were an American libertarian, I assume that you would not be able to sustain that. You're saying he supports Australian libertarianism somehow because of the, I guess, potential of isolation from, I don't know. I don't know how a libertarian would make the case that he's a particularly compatible. I mean, literally his spending bill is the largest spending bill. Is it of all time? The things that he's doing right now, the redistribution of wealth of poor to the rich, basically using the government for the biggest move of money from people who aren't already rich to the rich. Not even, we can't call that free trade. That it's very oligarchy kind of shit. So I don't know if you're saying he's good for Australian libertarianism, but he's literally expanding presidential power and government power in America. He's certainly, I think even American libertarians here recognize that he is no good for them.
No, of course. Well, Massey put up some resistance. I think Rand Paul voted against it.
Yep.
Or maybe it was the other way around. I don't know. But look, I attempt to be practical in my ideology. I know a lot of people in the chat are not exactly agreeing with that position, but I attempt to be practical. And I think when a government has spent itself into a hole, then there must be a desperate measure in order, if you want to pay out the debt, then you have to grow the economy somehow. And I think I would personally support, yes, we need to make these cuts, and we need to make this basically light a fire under the economy and see what happens.
I think the big beautiful bill is going to add trillions of dollars to the deficit. Right. So it's not helping us at all. It's just distributing all of our money to wealthy people here and adding to our deficit.
Well, I would disagree.
There's nothing to disagree with. That's just what it is.
These are the numbers, right? These are the numbers. This is the independence analysis, not even like partisan analysis that it is going to add that. But on top of that, you said light a fire under the economy. There's a difference between lighting a fire under and lighting the economy on fire. And
that's a good one.
Every step of, well, you can let me finish before you jump in. Every step of the way, economically, you're talking about things that were going to do good for the economy. He just destabilized the American credit rating and the American economy by being so unpredictable and seemingly volatile when it comes to our foreign trade partners, that now they are seeking new deals, including Australia, with other countries that are more reliable, even if they're not better in a humanitarian way, or even necessarily cheaper, but more predictable. He is setting us up for, and by the way, this is his second go. He went the first time, and we have now seen the problems with Trumpism. And now we've come to phase 2, and we're like, well, maybe this time around, the explosion of the deficit that he did before by giving tax cuts to the people who don't need it and paying for it by taking from the poor. And now that he's run Doge, which are doing things like eliminating things like the Consumer Finance Bureau, which for every dollar you give it returns something like $20 to $30 to the actual consumers. I don't know which policies you're thinking are going to be smart, and especially when he already shit the bed the first time, and now you think the second time around the bed shitting is better?
Well, if you don't mind me retorting, I'd say when it comes to, you touched upon the idea of giving tax cuts to the rich. I think it's always been shown that tax cuts to the rich, taxation upon the rich that's always been passed off to the consumer. I think that's just the simple fact of.
No, it's very much never ever been that way.
I don't know
in a documented way. How would it? Yeah.
During the best periods of economic growth in our country's history, like under FDR, and then even later during part of even Reagan's term, the highest tier, where we're talking about the ultra rich, people were paying something like 90% taxes and everybody was doing better. So if you want to say that there may have been some increased consumer inflation, which by the way, right now, we've had tremendous inflation, even though we had the Donald Trump tax cuts this entire time. But also our most prosperous time as a country has been when wealth is redistributed, when if you hoard some crazy amount of money, you are some of that is taken back from you. You don't get to hoard it. I don't even know how you would make that case when you can look at income inequality in America and see that as time has gone on, and especially now, billionaires are able to accumulate more wealth than ever, and yet wealth disparity is higher than ever. If what you just said was true, then wealth disparity would have been better during the periods of time where rich people got to keep the most money. But instead, we have increased their wealth and decrease the amount of the pie that the rest of us get to share.
I would say that I don't think FDR's policies were sustainable. I don't think that the redistribution, while it led to short-term benefits, I don't think it's panned out. And this also goes for Woodrow Wilson's, I think, disastrous turn.
And Grant, all of
as the helmsman of
whatever you're repeating from your r/libertarian points are great that you can speculate about. The fact of the matter is all of those things have been reversed in some way. And right now we are living at a period of time where you can be the biggest billionaire you've ever been able to be. Somebody in America will probably be a trillionaire within the decade, and income inequality is higher than ever.
Well, I would also point out that billionaires are not necessarily, they're not sitting on wealth as liquid assets. A lot of that, or most of that, is bound up in investments.
Doesn't matter.
So that's not necessarily.
If you actually take it, absolutely doesn't matter, because it is still sitting money somewhere that could be redistributed. If they would actually invest, when you say invest in actual workers and shit, instead of, first of all, when you're saying a lot of theirs, if they have $100 billion and half of it is in investments, fine, let's just talk about taxing the half that isn't. Let's start talking about the stuff that they don't need to have.
Well,
and also, let's start talking about the way.
The only person who would approach half would be Warren Buffett.
And let's start also talking about the proportions of payments that they get to pay themselves, how much Elon Musk gets to make versus the people actually doing their work. All of these
aren't liquid.
All of these are elements to, and by the way, you're talking about most of them are investments. Most of them are holding them in stock, which is also a problem. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. I wanted to circle back to my idea that when you restrict the people who own the means of production, then eventually they're going to pass it back to the consumer. That is precise. I believe precisely what saying I have a monopoly, I have a stranglehold over the over what gets produced and when it is produced. All right. If you're going to take that away from me, all right, then I'm simply going to raise prices.
And then we should simply socialize their industry if they are pivotal and take them, have a regulatory body,
which I respect.
Or you have you can have regulatory bodies which prevent those types of things. But what you're describing still doesn't matter much, because what you are describing is essentially like the thing that people wouldn't understand when it came to the Bernie Sanders thing. Sure, you're going to try and pass it along. At the end of the day, hundreds of billions of dollars to trillions of dollars, if you add up the total, that they would have had access to will necessarily go back into the economy and go back to workers. So maybe they're going to increase prices, but everybody else will be doing much better than the amount they increase. Much like with the Medicaid for all thing, where people want to say, well, if you do Medicaid for all, you're going to pay an extra X number of dollars in taxes. And they never like to bring up, but you'll also pay this much less in your combined premiums. You'll pay this much less in your care for the year. And that your overall experience is going to be a net gain with better lives, better healthcare, better housing, better all. Sure, the cost of milk might go up. As long as your wages go up more than the cost of milk, fine.
Isn't that part of the idea behind the big, beautiful bill? That, yes, we slash some amounts of what they would claim to be wasteful spending. I'm not 100% convinced, but they would slash spending in order to stimulate the economy so that the people who have the money, whether or not you agree with the fact of the matter that they should have the money, will be able to attempt to increase the effect of their capital.
No, because first of all, the things that they are slashing are entitlements that once again pay back more than they take. So the nice thing about Medicaid is by doing Medicaid, you have an overall group that is healthier and you actually increase the amount of taxes that they can pay in overall. They're participating more. They are able to do more with their lives because they have healthcare. Entitlement, SNAP program, food program, these types of things actually pay us back. They are not things that we are wasting money on. But then what you are describing is the idea, the theory behind it all, which has been debunked since Reagan started talking about it. Trickle-down economics has never worked. If you give rich people more money, they hold on to more money. They have such a level of disdain and separation from the working class and poor people that to them, they are literally all numbers on a sheet. They don't care about those people. They care about making them more efficient. And now as we are heading into a world where we are going to be able to eliminate more and more entry-level positions at an extreme level over the course of the next 10 years, and then basically the entire working class over the next couple decades, right now we shouldn't be moving in a direction that creates more safety for the rich people who will be rich no matter what. We should be creating more safety for the people who are not rich and figure out what is our plan exactly if 30 to 40% of people there isn't work for in, let's say, 20 years from now, and it might even be much sooner for. Why aren't we talking about the things that are going to cover that? Why is it apparently that we are still doing this fake capitalism that we're pretending is being complemented by a pseudo democracy that hasn't been representative in almost the entire time it has existed, if it ever was, and not talking about things like, okay, we are going to just not have jobs for people before too long. Why is this what we're focusing on when we know what we are on the cusp of? And the obvious answer is the reason why billionaires' interests are being served the most is because the people in Congress serve billionaires the most. And the president is literally one of them.
Yes, no, I understand. And actually, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I just don't agree with the idea that wealth should be distributed through government means. I think it has always proved itself to be a inefficient and a wasteful way of doing it.
And the only other worse system is every other one.
Well, I don't agree.
Wealthy people have proved to us over and over again that they will not redistribute the funds themselves. So I don't understand what you're suggesting.
John, if you don't mind me asking, what is your net worth?
There is a high barrier of my net worth. Oh, dude, I'm broke. But
so
what I'm saying is,
John, I'm glad you answered that. I'm glad you answered that honestly. So you're broke. How much do you think the rich people actually give a fuck about you? Let's say they didn't have any restrictions. They could make as much money as they want. Do you actually think any of them give a shit about you? Not even as a person, but whatever group of people you exist in.
No, I believe in an economic system based upon self-interest. That's libertarianism. But my idea is that just lumping
broke libertarians
in all of
always
this
shock me.
And this
what is the system you would use? Go ahead. Other than a government, let's just get to what is the system you would use that isn't a government to redistribute the wealth to say, 1% of people cannot have 70% of all of the security, all of the resources that everybody gets.
Well, I would say free enterprise, and we need to slash the government that is preventing people from entering these markets. Cut the regulations and ensure that, if there's people who can do it cheaper, people who can do it better, people who you can foster community with, you can do that.
I think that that is the most naive take I have ever heard, even from a libertarian. The idea that the prevention of entering the market is somehow right now government protected, and that it is in fact not monopolies like Amazon who simply have to pretend to like Trump, and suddenly all the regulations that we're going to break them up, those things aren't really being talked about anymore. You are describing a world in which you will,
if you may.
You are describing a world in which we will all live in Amazon housing one day. And so instead of a government, you will have a corporation.
You have a choice whether to consume or not.
No, you don't.
You have a choice.
That's insane.
I mean, I have a choice.
To actually participate, and you're literally talking about being a self-dependent individual. How do you have the choice whether or not to participate in our economy? And therefore, you're saying like you have a choice, but it's kind of like you as a slave has a choice whether you're going to do this or that. Granted, I'm going to beat the fuck out of you if you choose wrong. If you do not participate in the consumerist economy in America, you are going to get the shit beat the fuck out of you. So if you do try to start a business and you don't try to order things through Amazon, your costs are going to go way up in a way that is going to make it impossible for your business to thrive.
I recycle and I make things myself. There's not really anything online that I really need to buy. I pay for internet, certainly, but I shop around and see if I can find the best deals.
And what do you use to shop around and find the best deals?
What I use? Well,
today you got up, let's say today,
I used to.
What's a tool you might need to buy right now?
Not really a whole lot of anything. I ride a bike to work. The bike's
But you said you build things out of recyclables. Do you have a miter saw?
Do I have a miter saw? Generally, I could, but I can also use one that I buy from the community.
How did you find that community miter saw?
How do you mean, how do I find it? I know people in real life.
Okay, great. So you get a community miter saw. Now, you need a new blade for it. Where are you getting your new blade?
Well, I can either buy local, or I can obviously use something that's publicly enterprised, like our mail system currently is. I don't necessarily have to buy from China or from...
I'm not asking you to buy from China. I'm saying that I think that you are absolutely full of shit here, that you aren't sitting here going like, I went on Facebook Marketplace, even buying this secondhand miter saw. The miter saw is still coming from a larger corporation.
I live in the middle of nowhere.
Sure. So you're buying secondhand perfectly. You're buying secondhand, perfectly working and in order items that are still coming from the bigger corporations, because people aren't building them in their garage.
Get any money for
you're
it.
Still getting a Grizzly, you're still getting a DeWalt, you're still getting the secondhand market still supports the firsthand market. But yes, they individually are not. And you're thinking, what? This is a model that everybody could do? That if everybody wanted to, they could only go secondhand because the secondhand market is so flooded with extra stuff.
It puts pressure on the corporations.
Good. Put pressure on the corporations. Good. Yeah. And by the way, they keep figuring out how to fuck people over with that. Look at the launch of the Nintendo Switch.
The thing about socialists, I find, is that they're actually really, really good consumers. And they've been brought up in a consumer environment, and they don't see an alternative.
Yes, we're hypocrites. We are hypocrites because we are here in a consumerist society, consuming when there is literally zero ability to have ethical consumption under. Meanwhile, you're over here defending capitalism, and homie, you already admitted you don't have any money. So you're defending a thing that isn't working for you, somewhat hypocritically.
No,
I'm defending socialism, which is the thing that I think we should head toward. And by the way, if you want to talk about socialist hypocrisy, I ain't the one, because I literally own this company and distribute to our workers based on a profit share model that is according to the labor they put in, regularly pay my employees a higher what you would call hourly wage than I receive. And my number two person who does most of the work always makes more, month after month, makes more money than I do. So that's fine if you want to talk about the other socialists, but you didn't find the right one if you were wanting to come at this one.
Look, I'm just saying that there are options, and I don't think it should be as unimaginable as people think. Maybe libertarian was the wrong way to describe myself. You know, I could also be a privileged.
For sure, incredibly privileged would be maybe the better way. To live in a community with such a robust You live in a community with apparently a robust second-hand market where you can make out of recycled material stuff enough to apparently pay for that for which you need to live. You have, as you've already pointed out, internet. I'm going to assume you also have a smartphone since you called on a web caller. If you're not also, or maybe you're calling from a computer.
No, I used a computer. It's
great.
kind of an old thing, but I can.
You also have a computer, you have internet access, you have, and apparently live in this incredible community that can sustain your minority lifestyle because you want to live a little bit fringe and apparently can make all of the extra Meanwhile, as a libertarian, you're talking about how you're living against the consumer way, even though libertarianism would be much more compatible with. I don't know if you know what your own positions are.
I have the freedom to choose.
No, you don't.
I've chosen.
You really don't. Because even your secondhand market is entirely dependent on the firsthand market. It's great that you live in an area and place with so much privilege that you have options to potentially live a more frugal lifestyle and still have comforts. And the fact that you don't recognize the absolute privilege that comes with living in a westernized, civilized nation that has excess of all of those things, that works for you, that you recognize that as anything besides privilege is crazy.
Community. No, but people will move towards this form of community if they feel
that's true. I think if we undermine corporations enough, people will head more toward communities, and it would be like a sort of communityism. I don't know what you would call it. Some sort of like, you'd have like maybe like places large peoples would live. This sort of communityism is probably what would take over if we did more things to undermine
very good, actually.
Corporations. Thanks. What they
but I don't trust an ordered collective with my money.
Nobody's described authoritarianism. All governments are going to have some form of quote unquote ordered, and you do have to have something to keep civil. But I don't know of a single socialist I remotely respect that isn't talking about a much, much more democratic, actually representative system, not a much less. A system which works for all people, that all people get a say in. Not much. Right now, we live in a joke of a democracy. The fact that we think this is a democracy, when thanks to gerrymandering and everything else, your representatives have nothing to do with whether or not they're representing the actual interests of an area.
That's true. That's true.
Crazy.
I don't trust them. I also don't trust any kind of collective that I don't myself have some kind of executive power over. And that's what always happens when you end up with.
Let's come back to your Trumpism then.
Impossible.
When it comes to America, which party has undermined more? Which one has passed more laws to divert further the representation from an area from looking like the actual area itself? In other words, let's say you have a state that has 50% Democrats and 50% Republicans, just to go easy on it, but they have a governor or group of one or the other. Which party has more dramatically changed it so that the representation will not look that way and will look much more heavily weighted one or the other? I'm specifically saying more heavily. I'm not going to pretend that one side hasn't done it as much or hasn't done it also.
I haven't really been thinking about that because I feel like this is a natural consequence of having a large and obscure government. No, just government general.
Okay, well, then since you haven't been thinking about it, I'll let you know. The Republicans are why the distribution of representation and the concept of democracy have been way further undermined than what the Democrats aren't great. I'm not a Democrat. Way, way worse. And in the last 5 years, as Project 2025 has been being worked on, you can go read Project 2025 yourself, and you can see how much of it we have gotten to. Donald Trump himself has undermined the ability for
particular kind of way.
Sir, you can't call in and say you're pro-Trump then, because Trump is expanding not just the government, but his own presidential powers to the point that he isn't convinced he will have to leave at the end of the term, even though that is locked in our Constitution, that it's 2 terms and then up.
Pro-Trump due to his foreign policy.
What was good about his tariff policy was fucking crazy. His foreign economic or his foreign defense policy? Which one is it that you think is good?
Kind of all of the above. At least I like it more. It entertains me.
Okay, well, how about what's good for people? Because you and I aren't going to debate what you find more entertaining. What's good for humanity? What is the better humanistic policy?
Well, you know, I'm a libertarian. I don't really care about humans. That's a joke. But kind
of a joke.
Kind of, yeah. But let me say, I actually very much enjoyed his tariff policy. I know that it is obviously a big damper on free trade, but I feel at this point the market, there's markets correcting themselves, and then there's markets
being set on fire
towards a worldwide collapse. Unsustainable and just rank distortions due to
what market is correcting itself? I'm just curious when you say that. What market is correcting itself?
US-China market. Look, I will accept.
That's a wild.
China.
Australia is literally right now making stronger bonds with China, as is Canada, are the other Western nations that are our trade partners, because we've become unreliable. And so, John, I don't even know how to debate you when I feel like I could make you from this point in the call debate you from earlier in the call, where you're like, sure, it undermines free trade, but then a minute ago you're like, but free enterprise is what would fix everything. I don't know that you know what your positions are.
We're in a situation right now where if something wasn't to be done, then we have a catastrophic collapse. We've pushed it so far in one direction that if we don't swing the pendulum back with a little bit of force, I think there will be no recovery.
The day that you realize your oversimplified metaphors like pendulums are not enough to explain a complex system will be the day you have a crisis and realize, oh shit, this was all just a bunch of nonsense. Because you're describing as though what Trump did is moving the pendulum back in a direction that was positive before, as though there were only two directions for this pendulum to swing. And it's nowhere, it's nothing like that. And as you've mentioned, it's actually undermined a lot. It's put a lot into instability. The American economy, which you might find very entertaining, is now as brittle as it's ever been, even as we're continuing to look at
American
markers.
Economy is robust. It's the best investment in the world, unfortunately.
The American economy is robust in that the stock market is doing well. Go talk to people on the ground.
No,
our wealth inequality is still through the goddamn roof. The markers of what we measure the economy and tell the rest of the world means we're doing good does not speak to whether or not there's literally child poverty in the richest nation in the world. But I agree. The rich people here are doing better than ever, and they get the best healthcare in the world.
Yeah, well,
who gives a fuck about them?
Necessarily think it's that way.
I'm glad they'll be very healthy when we eat them.
We're conflating between the health of an entire economy and the health of 1%. I don't think you can quite do that.
That's literally what America does. That's how America broadcasts. We literally describe having the best healthcare system in the world. Come try it. Come try it as a non-rich person. Come have some fun with it. Because it is not the best healthcare system in the world if you are middle class or lower. It's actually a very bad. People talk about their wait lines they go through. I literally tried to just get my establishing care with a new primary care provider where I live because I just moved. I am months away from being able to say, hi, I'm Jimmy, open a file, because they're so backed up. But, you know, if you were in the NHS right now and you broke your leg, they wouldn't even fix your leg for 6 months, which isn't true. You get it fixed immediately. We literally broadcast our success based on what the privileged classed people get, not what the middle class, working class, or less get, period. And I don't know which foreign policy you think is good, because what he's doing in
the
what he's doing in the Middle East is insane. What's happening with Iran is partially his fault for pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal. What's that?
No, Iran wasn't following the rules. I'll go into bat for him.
What rules did they still need to follow? We had a deal with them. We tore it up. Oh my God, America! First of all, first of all, our own intelligence said that they were following the rules for the most part, and they weren't seeking a nuclear bomb. And Donald Trump went, well, I think not, and so we're doing it. So you don't even have the evidence of what you're saying. But also, we had a nuclear deal with them. Trump got into office, and because it was popular with Fox News viewers, he tore it up and said, we're not going to play by the rules. And you want to sit there and go, this country that never plays by the rules should police the other people who aren't quote unquote playing by the rules, with still zero evidence that there were any nuclear bombs, as though we can't remember. I remember the weapons of mass destructions in Iraq. We just love repeating it. I wonder George W. Bush is largely responsible for ISIS and those other radicalized groups. I wonder which ones Donald Trump will be responsible for in the future as we head toward more destabilizing actions that are going to bring us another 9/11 one day.
But let's be frank. When it comes to geopolitics, there's no such thing as morality.
Well, those are words you could say in an order. Why would I agree with that?
Because it's all based upon wider systems of power.
We've literally seen that now that things are more visible, countries make decisions differently and slower. As bad as things are happening in Gaza right now, if it weren't for smartphones, it would already be over and the whole place would be gone. Many, many thousands more would be dead. So we know that governments are capable of making better decisions than before, even as they make terrible decisions. And we know that sunlight tends to be the thing that does that. And so sunlight comes in the form of both exposure and then pressure. And so if a government by the people is actually making those decisions because the people are actually watching the government, you can see a future world where these geopolitical foreign policies are going to be more humanistic. Those are just words you say. Goodness sakes.
Yeah, I suppose that's the conversation. I'm not going to pivot to Gaza because that's a whole nother kettle of
genocide.
Fish.
That'd be tough. Yeah. Let's just stick to the other foreign policy stuff, like how he's absolutely biffed it in Russia with Russia and Ukraine, coming in saying he would have it done before he even took office. And now he's having to come around and go, oh, remember everything I was told before about Russia? Turns out it's true. And that he actually he's acting like he just found out that Vladimir Putin is a despot.
That was to stimulate the European defense budget. Actually get them spending again.
So
why would that be?
When Donald Trump does something absolutely fucking redacted, he's actually secretly doing genius shit, even as he is melting down on Truth Social. And again, his promise was he would have the war ended the first week, not even of his presidency, but after he was elected, before even taking office. But that was all part of this greater 4D chess move that he was going to make NATO pay more money.
No, it's the politician's lie. I was like, when he said that, I was like, okay, fair enough. People make these promises and they're ridiculous. All right,
John, at least you share the gullibility of every libertarian I've ever met, because this is
thank you.
This is an absolutely that you think this man is a genius when he is visibly
no, I don't think he's a
stupid. You are describing genius levels of political calculus and then we got our end goal of the increased NATO spending, only at the cost of thousands of civilian lives in Ukraine, many thousand more of Russian lives, because Russia they do not care about their own soldiers. There isn't a thing you have said so far that all of the evidence against is heavily present.
Like I said, there's no morality, and they should have been more. Well, all right, fair enough. Agree to disagree. But
I mean, I know how the words work. What's a morality? There are many moralities. You can defend which ones are better and upon what basis there are. It's literally pivotal to what we do here, because we're trying to spread secular humanism over any type of theological morality, which I have to assume is part of the basis of your own libertarian thing, because I assume you find no appeal in humanism because you have a concept of it's not all going to matter in the eternal perspective of things, but I don't know where yours is coming from. I guess that's almost a hope for you, because otherwise I just think you were a sociopath.
I mean, I maybe, I don't know, but you won't have to worry about me. Look,
I wasn't worried about you before.
Well, that's scary. Where were we again? Sorry, you went on a bit of a.
I don't know. All I know is you've called in to defend a foreign policy. In the notes, you mentioned that it's best since Reagan, despite the fact that their foreign policies are literally incompatible with each other. I don't think Reagan's were as great, but you will find that the most Reaganistic Republicans here are the ones who are the loudest, most against Donald Trump.
I don't know. Look, the dude successfully collapsed the Soviet Union.
And Donald Trump is rebuilding it. If he could turn in his grave, he'd be doing flips right now.
If you mean the EU being the Soviet Union, then I suppose so, yeah.
If I mean the EU being the Soviet Union, do you think that was a clever response? I think it's maybe the Soviet Union president who literally within the last 2 weeks changed his goal from parts of Ukraine to all of Ukraine is a part of Russia and needs to return to it. So no, I don't mean the EU as the Soviet Union. Sorry, what?
I said, I guess the EU's better arm up, you know?
No, I don't know. I don't know why we need to do that. I don't know why we can't do preemptive defense to make it an impractical war like we were doing.
I don't know. I feel like, well, if we wanted to talk about preemptive defense, then Iran was pretty preemptive, you know?
It's not preemptive if you're imagining the shit. When we're talking about preemptive defense, we're talking about somebody who is at a war that has a track. It's literally like, all right, first we go to Ukraine, then we go to Poland or Belarus or whatever, where they are getting closer and closer, and you support the entry point to prevent the further progression.
Generally, you strike the place where they're
We haven't struck Russia. We have only supported the existing conflict.
It would be nice.
We only supported the existing conflict between Russia and Ukraine that Russia initiated on Ukraine, which would also be the difference between us and supporting the offensive that Israel is doing on Iran.
For the record, I'm excited to see Russia collapse.
But you seem to be excited to. I feel like you would wake up and see a nuke went off somewhere in the world and would be like, well, this is entertaining from everything I've heard you say so far.
Tel Aviv.
What's that?
I'd be happy if it went off over Tel Aviv. But
you would be happy that a nuke went off anywhere is fucking crazy.
Well, I don't know, you know?
Okay, well, I gotta say, as we're defending whose morality is superior, I think the mass killing of mostly civilians is always a sad thing, not a positive thing. And there's not a group of people to whom they could belong that I would be like, oh, that one's awesome.
Yeah, look, I mean, I wouldn't be like dancing in the streets, but, you know, it would be okay. Sometimes, you know, it would certainly put a bit of a wet blanket on the whole capitalist issue.
40 minutes in, I'm just wondering, almost 40 minutes in, was any of this real or was this a troll call from the onset? Did we waste 40 minutes or are you really John from Australia who's actually a libertarian who has the views you just broadcasted?
Well, I think it's pretty clear I'm not a libertarian, but most of these views were correct.
Then what are you? Because if you think this is the socialistic perspective, half the shit you've said, especially coming on and going, you know, obviously leftists aren't happy with Israel, but to say nuke Tel Aviv is fucking insane. What perspective are you think you're presenting?
I don't know, man. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. We'll figure that out and call back because this was wildly frustrating. Yeah.
See you guys.
Bye.
Have a good one. Lady didn't say much, but you know, that's all right.
I'm a misogynist.
I had nothing to say. Goodbye.
Bye.
That's okay. I've heard your stream. I don't think you had much to contribute.
You're an asshole. Goodbye.
Bye, Dick.
Fuck you.
What a fucking douche.
He was like, thank you so much. Our producer just had a really great thing that she said that I will not repeat.
Can't repeat. Thank goodness your mic isn't live. But producer,
honestly,
would you be the sweetest little person and come and get my mug and go fill it with water and bring it back to me?
I had nothing to say to him because everything he was saying was so stupid. It was exactly like I said this, I think, on the podcast recently, where when I was younger, I thought when I didn't understand something, it was because I was dumb. But in reality, it's because what they're saying makes no fucking sense. And that's what was happening in that call. And I was like, this is not even worth, like, I actually don't care what that man has to say. And of course, it's like at the end of it, I was thinking, am I going to tell him that he's stupid? And then I was like, no, I don't want to like be mean to a person who is not like explicitly mean to me. And then he finishes the call and says, lady didn't have much to say. Yeah. You're stupid. You're bald. I already know from here. I already know your penis is the size of a grain of rice. Good luck. Also, I would like to know how he's telling me. Also, I have nothing against bald people. I just know that men get upset about it. But
it's not bald. He wears recycled hair that he gets from the community.
That's what I was going to say. I would like to know how he's talking about how he has this whole community of people who are giving him all these recycled goods that he's manufacturing into whatever shanty he lives in. But then he also said he lives in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, he's a community.
So I'm like, so do you live in the middle of nowhere, or do you live in a place where you have all of the resources because your neighbors are willing to do that for you? But then you're also, again, that was amazing when you're like almost like a commune. That was, yeah, that was crazy. Fuck that guy.
Hey, what's up? I'm glad you enjoyed that clip of people talking to each other. I'm Jimmy and this is Eric. And well, we'd really love it if you would support us. Where can they support us, Eric? Where would they do that?
I don't know, Jimmy, because I don't have the notes on me right now.
This is too long. Like the outros have to be short. Patreon.com/call the line.